Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We're going to talk about how the revolution will be atomized. It shouldn't be, but it is. And that's just something that we have to deal with. And I'll explain what I'm talking about in a minute here. It's been a matter of some frustration to me, but we have to deal with the realities as they exist, right? So one thing that I've had to learn was how to ask people for help, to ask people for resources, etc., etc., etc. And so that was one important realization. Welcome, David Kane. And the other was understanding that I was only able to do so much by myself. The scope of the projects that I could tackle were much smaller if I was going to be insistent on doing everything myself. You know, if you look around at everybody on the right, who has managed to do the most by themselves? I think you would probably have to say Stefan Molyneux. You know, Stefan's built up a really large subscription base. He's built up a very powerful tool for whatever he wants to use it for. You know, selling his books, pushing ideas, introducing new people to his support base, etc., etc. But he also remains extremely vulnerable. You know, he is entirely dependent upon YouTube, or almost entirely dependent. And Coulter is another possibility. You know, people who are operating more or less alone. And I respect it, and I not only respect it, I get it. That's kind of how I focused. And so, I mean, I don't know. You know, I haven't talked to Stefan for a while. I don't know. Somebody said that he'd had some issues or something. I know nothing about any of that. I'm simply pointing out that he's been very, very successful working more or less by himself, but he essentially represents the ceiling. And you know, this isn't a criticism. This is an observation that has affected my thinking. Another thing that's affected my thinking was the whole scenario with Comicsgate. When I first got into doing comics, you know, people were saying, "Oh, you know, the SJW stuff. There's this opportunity. There's this problem. You guys can help solve that, etc., etc." And one of the things that I thought we needed, and that other people talked about us needing, is an alternative to the failing diamond distribution system. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with diamond per se, but the whole business of trying to sell comics through a monopoly is a bad idea. and trying to sell them to the comic stores and so forth, it's really not viable anymore. The market has shrunk already by more than, I think it's pushing 30% now from its peak. And so what's the point in that? So what we did was we set up an alternative distribution system. Like you can see, here's a couple of the things that we've done. These are like this is one of ours, Alt Hero Volume 1. See, there's the Arcaven logo. So we did this, but we also are working with other folks who are doing original stuff. This is Richard Fox's Ember War. Nice, nice hardcover edition. And then, of course, you all know about Diversity in Comics, John Della Rose, Flying Sparks, a pair of high-quality hardcovers from, as you can see, Dark Legion Comics. You know, we set that up specifically so that all these people who wanted to do independent comics would have a distribution system to go through it. But nobody on the right wants to take advantage of it. I shouldn't say nobody. Relatively few of the people who are complaining about the need for this. You know, and we even set the whole thing up in a way that it can do automatic fulfillment all around the world. Australia, Europe, the States, Canada, without having to send anything out, because we knew that people who were doing crowdfunding weren't going to want to mail out 500 comics themselves, right? So it's remarkable to see that most of these people who are complaining about the need for this are still chasing after the existing third tier comics publishers. It's crazy. Now, and again, I'm not complaining about these folks, and I'm not criticizing these folks. They can do whatever they want. We don't need them. We have absolutely no need for them. Our stuff is going great. You know, we're now working on our first movie. You know, it's actually gone much better than I ever imagined. It's actually difficult to keep up with. You know, I was working on the script just tonight. But then, you know, we've been talking. A lot of you are very enthusiastic about the Castelia Deluxe program. I still haven't. No, I don't. I don't believe Posobiec is publishing his comic through us. You know, I don't. I don't think that most people are terribly aware, but you know, and I think that they're all trying to become publishers themselves, which, as someone who has spent the last few years creating a publishing house, I can tell you is nuts. The only reason that we created a publishing house was because we didn't have any other option. The problem is Amazon, with the ebooks system and with the you know, Lulu paperback system that they've got, they have a created the illusion of allowing you to create a publishing house. But you can't. You know, what you do is you become part of Amazon's publishing house. They just don't call it that. And so sometimes you can become a winner that way. But here's where it gets really weird. And in most cases, you might say, well, maybe it's because they just don't approve of you, they don't like you, you're too extreme, et cetera, et cetera. And that is true in a few cases, but it's not true in most of them. Most of them couldn't care less. And what's really ironic about it is that they're perfectly happy to work with like the devil mouse. They're perfectly happy to work with a massive SJW converged corporation. So, if there was any distaste for working with me or anyone else, I'm definitely the lesser of multiple evils and so forth. And so Daydream Continuum says writers want to go to Marvel, DC, and Dark Horse. Well, of course, because what they're all looking for is they're looking for approval. They're looking for authorization. And that's one thing that we don't give those kind of people, is we don't give them mainstream authorization. But that's really not what we're talking about here. We're mostly talking about people that want to, that know that's not an option, but they are insisting on trying to do things their own way. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. The problem is when everybody tries to do it that way, nobody really gets anywhere. And that's what I mean about the atomization of the revolution, is that at some point, those nodes need to come together in cooperation. And that's why I've always been very open to cooperation with people, whether it is Milo, whether it's Jack Posobiec, whether it is Mike Cernovich, whether it's Owen Benjamin, etc., etc. I'm always happy to look for ways to work with and support other people, because I've seen the way that benefits everybody. It makes everybody stronger, and it makes it much, much harder for people to pull these various demonetization games, etc., etc. I mean, it isn't that we haven't faced those various issues. We've been deplatformed. You may not recall, but we were actually very briefly deplatformed by Amazon for about 16 hours. We were threatened at one point by PayPal. Obviously, we were famously deplatformed by Indiegogo. But because we have a very strong and supportive core, because we have the VFM, because we have the Dread Ilk, and now we're in alliance with the Bears, it's not so easy to pick on us anymore. And, I mean, when I was talking about how far is too far and that sort of thing, I mean, we were seriously considering going on the offensive But I realized that we need to we need to learn from the the battles of the past. You know, what you don't want is you don't want the cavalry intoxicated with victory running out there and looking for trouble. We're not going to do that. We are going to continue to build, and we're going to continue to strengthen the foundation. And when we are attacked, not if, when we are attacked, we are going to make whoever decides to do that absolutely regret it. And that's a promise. You know, John Yossarian says, we are the trouble. Right. We don't need to go looking for it. We don't need to yeah, but don't all those war books say that offensive is best? In the appropriate time and in the appropriate place. I like to use the example of Wellington in the Peninsular War, of course, but I was just reading the third Captain Alatriste book, and he talks about how after the Spanish tercios managed to hold off a much larger attack, a 5-1 attack against them by the Dutch in Flanders, the less experienced soldiers started chasing after the Dutch after the Dutch finally gave up the attack and began to retreat. But all the experienced soldiers knew better. They held their ground. They stayed in their position and stayed in their ranks because they knew it might not be over. And it wasn't until the literal cavalry arrived that they relaxed and moved forward. And so trust me, we know how to attack. Welcome, Tud Fudders. But the key is knowing when to stop, knowing when to hold the ground that you've taken, knowing how to accept the victory and not turn victory into defeat. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. In the Peninsular War, there was a battle. I'm not recalling the name of it at the moment, but it was a big victory, and Wellington had given his cavalry commanders very specific orders to stop after they managed to drive off the French cavalry. Instead, they galloped on in their enthusiasm, having driven the French cavalry off the field. The British infantry was successful, but the British cavalry continued and actually captured more than 23 artillery guns. And this was a big deal because the French had a big advantage in artillery, and the guns that the British had were these very, very ancient and outmoded Spanish and Portuguese guns. And so they captured the guns, drove off the French artillery that had been men who had been guarding it. And then a French infantry formation had come up, discovered the guns, and dragged them all back to know that conflict is going to find us. Luis Nunez says, offensive is all good, but can you sustain it to the desired end? Don't be Julian. Win every battle just to die of a wound with your army stranded without food and water in the desert. Right, exactly. And so I think that, and that's why I was asking the question, how far is too far? because I think that I was on the verge of being not intoxicated, but maybe a little carried away. Maybe a little carried away. And so we've got so many things going on, so many great things going on, that I think it behooves us to focus on doing those things to the best of our capability and to the greatest extent of our capacities. And so, one of the reasons why all of our crowdfunding has been successful is because we've focused on delivering. We haven't always delivered perfectly, but we will deliver on those things that we haven't delivered. And in some ways, we've exceeded expectations. And so, that's the key. The key is focusing on what we have already committed to do. And if any unforeseen problems arise, then we will address that. So I think that what I would like to encourage those of you who are on your own, building your own projects, building your own platforms, and that sort of thing, I would strongly encourage you to look for as many ways to cooperate with others and to work with others as you can, especially if it's in a way that doesn't interfere with what you're doing on your own. I'm not saying, plenty of people come to me and say, I'd like to publish a book or something. Well, at this point in time, there's not much that we can do for them that they can't simply do. I just tell them, if you want to get a book published, just go and publish it on Amazon. We, at this point in time, we can really only work with established authors where we can help them build from where they are. But we can't do much to take somebody from zero to established. But we can help somebody who's established themselves on Amazon successfully. We can help them build a stronger foundation that is not completely dependent upon Amazon. We are no longer dependent upon Amazon. My goal, my focus for the last year, actually more like the last year and a half, was to build up our independent print business and build up the independent store on Archaven Comics, because that way it's much, much harder for anybody to interfere with it. There's a question on what's the latest news on the Indiegogo case. The Indiegogo case is resolved, and we will not entertain any questions about it. We do not use any word to describe it other than to say that the situation has been resolved to the mutual satisfaction of both parties. So, that's all I have to say about it. Let's see here. Let's do some super chats. Are conservatives too far gone into climate change and progressivism? Conservatives are too far gone, period. Conservatives have given themselves over to grifters and gatekeepers. Let's see here. Okay. Upchuck McDuck says, Vox... Oh, wait, no, that's not the first one. Hi, Vox. May you define Christian nationalism? Certainly. It is, first and foremost, being a Christian And secondly, being focused on the sovereignty of one's own nation as well as other nations. It means rejecting all the concepts of multiculturalism and open borders and free trade and all of these other dogmas that are specifically designed to weaken the nations. Christianity fundamentally relies upon a nationalistic perspective, a worldview that involves the various and diverse nations. You can see it in the Bible all the time. Now, Christianity, the kingdom of God, is not of this world, and so what the globalists do, because of course they are dependent upon lies, is that they lie and they claim that the kingdom of God is of this world, and so that's why you see these perversions of verses where they say, there is neither Jew nor Gentile. Well, how do you say that if there's neither Jew nor Gentile, how do you, in the kingdom of God, in Jesus Christ, then how on earth do you turn that into that there are no Germans or Englishmen, that Sweden is a nation of immigrants? You can't. It's a lie. But notice how evil has now progressed from saying, oh, there's no difference between Gentiles, to, oh, there's no difference between men or women either in this world. That's false. It's totally anti-Christian. Christianity fundamentally has a nationalistic perspective with regards to the world. There may not be nations in Jesus Christ, there may not be nations in heaven, but in the fallen world, there are nations. And the party that wishes to destroy the nations is the same party behind the Tower of Babel, which is to say the prince of the world, the fallen prince of the fallen world. So Upchuck McDuck says guerrilla warfare has existed for a long time. Yeah, we were just talking about the Peninsular War. That's really the first big guerrilla war. So why are we now seeing this 4GW revolution? Because of nuclear weapons. The big army battles are no longer really viable. You're not going to have the Russians sending vast tank divisions through the Fulda Gap. With the advent of the ICBM and the tactical nuke, it's fundamentally impossible to engage in that kind of warfare. And so, and also, the open borders and free trade has created tremendous opportunities for proxy war, and guerrilla warfare, light infantry, etc., etc. And so, if you talk to Martin Van Creveld, or if you read Martin, what I would recommend that you read if you want to understand that better is read Martin Van Creveld's The Transformation of War. He doesn't use the term 4GW, he uses the term non-Trinitarian warfare, but it's very, very similar. I would say 4GW is a specific type of non-Trinitarian war. Another question, what is the most compelling case example that Christianity is not compatible with social justice? Social justice is fundamentally, well, I guess the first thing is Christianity is concerned with actual justice. Social justice necessarily is a modification of actual justice, so therefore the two cannot be the same. But if you want an actual example, equality. There is no equality from the Christian perspective, none whatsoever. Everything you read about Christianity is the separation of the wheat from the chaff, the sheep from the goats, etc., etc. There's no equality, there's no spiritual equality, there's no equality of any kind whatsoever. The only equality is that all are fallen short of the glory of God. That's not equality. That's like saying, well, everybody's human, or everybody has a heart. You know. Bunny Bear wants people to know that 2 tickets are available for Sunday. He's talking about he or she, I guess. Sorry, is talking about Owen's show in Ohio. So if you're looking for tickets, direct message her at Bunny Galore _714 on Instagram. I think that's what IG stands for. Wrath of the Monarch says, I've never understood the marginal right's need for authorization from people who hate them. Were they not hugged enough in their formative years? No, it's because that they've been propagandized to believe that that's the elite. I used to subscribe to that. I wanted to get published by a big publisher. I was very happy to get published by Pocket Books, but I really wanted to get to move up to the more prestigious imprints. Pocket Books always sounded a little bit low end. I would have rather been published by Simon and Schuster proper. You know what I mean? It's stupid vanity. It's all the real reason is it's vanity. Seth Rich says PewDiePie was confirmed in the Quarterings D live stream. Who else knows what he's watching? Yeah, I mean, perhaps he's watching here. We have no idea. JB14 said, I came because of the winning. I stay because of all of the crushing. 2019 to date has been a year of crushing for us. But we cannot assume that it's just going to continue. We cannot assume that the next battles are going to be as easy as the previous ones. So don't relax. Don't get cocky, or of the side that initially appeared to be winning. That is almost certainly true of this cultural war that we're dealing with now. The other side is all madness, confusion, and despair. We have faith, hope, and love.